Hey everyone, welcome to our research highlight for August 2025. My name is Claire McLean. I'm a physical therapist. I specialize working with people who have Parkinson's, and I love research. So I love sharing videos about some of my favorite research studies and reviews because exercise makes a huge difference for people with Parkinson's. And there's a lot of research to back that up. But there is nobody, well, not nobody. There are not that many opportunities for organizations to share that information about the research. When it comes to a pharmaceutical medication, once it is proven to be helpful, then there are drug reps. So there are people whose job it is to go out and spread the message. We developed this new drug. It's very beneficial. We want you to try it. And so the word gets spread. There are commercials on TV, as you see, and other methods by which information is shared about this new treatment that is helpful. When it comes to exercise, there is no funding or support really for once research is published showing beneficial effects. There's nobody then who's making sure that information gets out to everyone, to neurologists, to people living with Parkinson's. And there's so much research. And so that's what I'm here to do, is to share that information and hopefully motivate you to get started with exercise, to try new things, to work harder, to challenge yourself in new and different ways, get your heart rate up. There's so much potential. So this month, the article I'm going to talk about is Intensive Rehabilitation Treatment in Early Parkinson's Disease, a randomized pilot study with a 2-year follow-up. And we are talking about this because 2 months ago, we covered the Spielman et al. Article, How Might Physical Activity Benefit People with Parkinson's? They have a list of all the ways that exercise could and probably is helping people with Parkinson's. Two of the things they list are improved drug efficacy and optimization of the dopaminergic system. And the improved drug efficacy got me excited because people ask about this all the time, about medications and how does it work with exercise. And my experience working with people for close to 18 years who have Parkinson's. So I've been specializing with that population for that long. I have a group of people that I've been working with now 10 to 12 years for many of them. And I certainly see in this small group of people, I see a huge impact and symbiotic relationship between medication and exercise. Many people need dopamine to move and exercise well. So medication is important. Then when they exercise well, it helps their medication work better and they feel better and they do better. And then what I see over the long term is that people do not need to change their medication. Some people go down on their medication, some people maintain, some people go up, but slightly. And that is very different than the typical trajectory of people living with Parkinson's, where over time, medication doesn't work as well and they need more and more over time. And it still, even taking more doesn't work as well. And it only lasts for a certain amount of time. And they go through these ups and downs throughout the day. So trying to really figure out the best optimization of both medication and exercise for people is, what I'm really trying to do. So I wanted to talk about a couple of the articles that look at the interaction between exercise and medication because it does exist. So last month, we talked about the same research group, Frazetta et al. Out of Italy, and we talked about the intensive rehabilitation treatment program that they have developed being applied to people who have dyskinesia, and how exercising intensely allowed people to reduce their medication while maintaining good movement and motor scores, and thereby experience less dyskinesia, which probably was from a couple mechanisms. Probably one is from the reduction in medication, since dyskinesia tends to be a side effect of medication, but also just that exercise and developing and reinforcing good motor movements and plans in your brain help reduce the aberrant and unwanted movements that is dyskinesia. So then I wanted to cover another one of their articles. So this one was published in 2015. It is already 10 years old. And unfortunately, I don't think most people have heard about it. So they have this intensive rehabilitation program that they've put together that is 3 hours of exercise and therapy per day, not all intensive. Some intensive, some skill-based, some real life. Let's move better and function better in our daily lives. So it's something that really most people could do. Some people can obviously do a bit higher intensity, but is beneficial. We need lots of repetition and practice to see a difference. So 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for 4 weeks. In this study, so they had administered this program to people with more advanced Parkinson's symptoms prior to this. Maybe that'll be the one that I talk about next month. And then they decided what's going to happen if we administer this program to people early after they're diagnosed, and people maybe who haven't even started taking levodopa therapy yet. What happens if we get started exercising early, and then they actually followed people for a 2-year follow-up, not just right after the therapy or 6 months later or a year later. They took the time to follow people 2 years later to see what was happening. So their abstract, the background: although physical exercise improves motor aspects of Parkinson's disease, it is not clear whether it may also have a neuroprotective effect. Objective: in this 2-year follow-up study, we determined whether intensive exercise in the early stages of the disease slows down PD progression. Methods: 40 newly diagnosed patients with PD were treated with rasagiline, MAOB inhibitor. It's the generic of Azilect. They were randomly assigned to 2 groups. MIRT group is the intensive rehabilitation group, and that was 2 28-day multidisciplinary intensive rehabilitation treatments at a 1-year interval, so right at the beginning of the study and then 1 year later, and a control group that only took medication. In both groups, the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale Section 2, 3 were done. 6-minute walk test, timed up and goes, where you're sitting in a chair, you stand up, walk around a cone, come back and sit down. PD Disability Scale, PDDS, and levodopa equivalents were assessed at baseline, that is T0, 6 months is T1, 1 year is T2, 18 months T3, and 2 years is T4. Results are 2 years later. Results: over 2 years, the UPDRS 2 and 3, TUG, and PDDS differentially progressed in the 2 groups. In the MIRT, the rehab exercise group, all scores at T4 at the end of 2 years were better than at T0 at the beginning. People were better 2 years later while living with Parkinson's. This is very important to hear. No changes were noted in the control group. Levodopa equivalent dose. So in the control group, they didn't experience a lot of change. So that is good. Medication was helping, but that is very different. No change is different than actually being better than at the beginning of the study, which is what they had from exercise. Levodopa equivalent dosages increased significantly only in the control group. So the group that was not exercising needed more medication to control their symptoms, with a decrease in the percentage of patients on monotherapy. So monotherapy is if they're taking rasagiline only, one medication. More people in the control group needed to take levodopa to help their symptoms so that they felt better and could live their lives. In the exercise group, the percentages of such patients remained higher. So more people were able to stay on monotherapy. Some people in the exercise group did need carbidopa levodopa to help support them in feeling their best. And there's nothing wrong with taking carbidopa levodopa to help you feel your best. But it is one of the ways to measure how people are doing. Is medication needed or not? And does exercise reduce your need for medication? The results suggest that the intensive rehabilitation training might slow down the progression of motor decay. It might delay the need for increasing drug treatment, and thus it might have a neuroprotective effect. Mic drop. So that's what we want to hear. We want to hear that exercise is helping people move and feel better, and also impacting their need for medication. This is very exciting. So with this article, there's an introduction. I'm not going to read through everything because then this video would be an hour, and my goal is to keep it as short as possible. The abstract really summarizes the most important parts, but you'll see, they have an introduction. They lay out this, people admitted T0, they're in either the exercise group or the control group. They do 4-week treatment. And then 6 months passes and they have their first assessment. Then at T2 is 1 year after the beginning, and then they do another 4-week treatment, and then 6 months later they're assessed, and then at 6 months later they're assessed again, which is 2 years total from the very beginning. So all they did was 4 weeks here and here, 8 weeks in 2 years. They weren't even being supervised with their exercise for this entire duration. Imagine what would be possible then if you were actually exercising on a regular basis consistently who knows what could happen? It's pretty exciting to think about. Of course, these people, after doing this 4-week treatment, were coached and recommended, and for the most part, followed through with exercise afterwards, but it was not a part of the study. That was something that would have been variable for different people. Some people probably exercise more, some people didn't exercise as much. So, would it be worth it to you when you're first diagnosed to do an intensive treatment for 1 month to then 1 month and then another month to then be doing better 2 years later than you were at the beginning? To me, the answer is yes. So the intro continues. They talk about the methods. There were 40 people in this study, so still not a big study compared to medication studies that may have hundreds or even thousands of people in them. Exercise studies tend to be smaller because it's very time intensive. It's not as easy as just handing out a pill and having a placebo group and a treatment group. Exercise is much more time intensive for everyone involved. Assessment of outcomes. So they looked at the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale, 6-minute walk test, timed up and go, and the self-assessment of the Parkinson's Disease Disability Scale. Secondary outcome measures was the dosage of levodopa equivalent and the number of people who were only on one medication, the monotherapy with restagilene at the end. That's a tongue twister. People were evaluated. So they basically go into more detail of what was discussed in the abstract up there. Sample size, statistical analysis. If you're a researcher, by all means, read all the details. Intervention. So this is the same intervention. If you watch my video from last month, same type of thing. So they were admitted, they stay on site, which for some people may be preferable. I really think that this could happen on an outpatient basis. So you could come in to do intensive therapy and exercise without having to stay on site somewhere, and we could still do a lot of really good things. For here, they have people coming from all over the country, and it's easy to just stay on site. So they stay there and have a whole team that they're working with. The exercise program consisted of 4 weeks of treatment with 3 one-hour daily sessions, 2 hours in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, 5 days a week. The first session consisted of cardiovascular warm-up activities, relaxation exercises, muscle stretching, exercises to improve range of motion of the spine, pelvic, and scapular joints, postural changes in the supine position. The second session consisted of exercises to improve balance and gait using a platform to challenge balance, and also treadmill training. Let's see. So all the exercises on the treadmill were aerobic with a heart rate reserve of 60 to 70% and a maximum speed on the treadmill scrolling of 3.5 kilometers per hour. Patients trained for 30 minutes every day for 4 weeks for a total of 20 sessions, so 5 days a week, every week. A physiotherapist monitored the patient's activities during the entire treadmill training. Before the training session, we determined the maximum tolerated walking speed, and then the speed was reduced and used for a 2-day warm-up, and then the belt speed was increased every 3 days by 0.05 stride cycles. We selected to adjust the speed in terms of stride cycles in order to normalize the data in terms of their height. So basically, they did the treadmill for 20 minutes. They started slower, they worked up the speed, and it was aerobic exercise. So more research that says that aerobic exercise is really important. The last of the 3 sessions they had per day was occupational therapy designed to improve autonomy in daily living activities. It included transfers from sitting to standing, rolling from supine to sitting, from sitting to supine, dressing, the use of tools, exercises to improve hand functionality and skills. At discharge, patients were instructed to continue a set of learned exercises in order to maintain functionality of the spine, scapular, shoulder, pelvic joints, along with instruction to walk at least 30 minutes a day or use the treadmill for 20 minutes a day. They were also asked to keep a diary of those activities. Patients in the control group underwent only pharmacological treatment. Results. So they talked about they started in 2010, closed 14 months later in terms of enrollment. No differences were observed in the 2 groups in terms of their age, Hoehn-Yahr stage, and baseline pharmacological treatment. The exercise group carried out 95% of their scheduled interventions. So they were able to follow through and do it. It was reasonable, even though it's a lot. They show the changes, the improvement after their first exercise intensive, and then after their second exercise intensive. Specific information about their outcome measures. And so what we see here, so this is levodopa equivalent dose. So the square boxes here is the exercise group. So 1 milligram of rasadgilline is the equivalent of 100 milligrams of levodopa. So they're on 100 milligrams. And for all of the people who did the exercise over time, they were on the same amount of medication. And then some people in that second year did need to start taking some carbidopa levodopa, and therefore were on a higher equivalent daily dose. But on average, it was still less than 150 milligrams at 2 years out, versus the group that did not exercise by 6 months needed more medication. And at each time point, they needed more medication. By 2 years out, the difference is an average of 350 compared to just below 150. So if you imagine how these two lines separate, if that continued, if this group kept exercising and this group kept not exercising, those lines are probably going to get further and further apart each year. Let's see. Oh yeah. And then here in this picture, they show the percentage of people who are on monotherapy, just needing rasadgilline. So the people who did the exercise are the boxes and the solid line here. The control is the people who were just taking medication. So the percent on monotherapy in the exercise group was 100% at a year. And then it was still 90% at a year and a half. And it was still at about 75% 2 years out, versus the control group, basically by 6 months out, less than 40 or about 40% of them were only taking the rasadgilline. 60% of them had needed to add carbidopa levodopa, an additional medication, and more at the year time point. And then that stayed stable through the second year. But the biggest difference in this first year of if you get started with good exercise and what you're able to maintain versus if you are not exercising. And again, I want to be very clear. I am not against medication. I think medication is very beneficial. And when it is necessary to help you have the best life possible and be able to exercise, you absolutely want to be on medication. This is more just looking at a way to measure the outcome of exercise and see that it was beneficial. So now I'll scroll back up here. Discussion. This is the first randomized controlled follow-up study that was designed to determine whether 2 exercise intensives have some positive effects on the progression of Parkinson's. Importantly, this study was performed in patients in the early stages of Parkinson's with the same pharmacological treatment at enrollment. The main result of this pilot study is that already in early stage of the disease, the exercise intensive seems to slow down the progression of motor decay, possibly modifying the course of the disease. And the exercise intensive seems to delay the need for increasing drug treatment. On the whole, these results suggest a possible neuroprotective or neurorestorative aspect of exercise in Parkinson's. Immediately after the first and second treatment, the scores of the scales used to evaluate several aspects of motor performance and autonomy in daily living activities showed a significant improvement compared with their baseline values. These results obtained in the early stage of the disease are similar to the ones reported in our previous study with patients in more advanced stages. Usually the presence of some motor symptoms is the reason why patients consult a neurologist, and at that time the diagnosis is made. Although symptoms are usually mild at this stage, they almost invariably reduce the patient's motor activity with progressive worsening of motor performance. So you have symptoms, then you're not moving as well, you exercise less, you're less active, then your symptoms are worse. And that's kind of the negative spiral that most people experience. Based on the present results, we speculate that early intervention with intensive rehabilitation programs at the initial stage might act as a motor shock by breaking this vicious cycle, resetting and restoring motor performance to values close to premorbid state, and plausibly slowing down the rate of motor decay. The second important result of this study is that the progression of motor decay was slower and in some cases even reversed in the exercise group compared with the control group. In fact, at the end of the 2-year observation period, motor performance and daily living activity scores were better than at baseline in the exercise group, while they remained stable in the control group. Importantly, this difference in progression was present despite the fact that most exercise-intensive patients were still on monotherapy, and the people in the control group actually were taking more medication. So the people in the exercise group were doing better on less medication than the people in the control group. They were on more medication and doing not as well. It's a big deal. Thus, it is possible that early exercise interventions might modify the course and the rate of progression of the disease by decreasing both the symptom severity and the need for increasing drug regimen. Very exciting. Okay, last little bit here. The mechanism underlying the beneficial effect of exercise in PD is still a matter of speculation. Several studies with Parkinsonian animal models have shown that physical exercise enhances brain neuroplasticity and increases plasmatic levels of different neurotrophic factors. In normal human subjects, exercise increases serum levels of different growth factors, which can cross the blood-brain barrier in both directions. Thus, it is possible that following exercise, the increase of circulating growth factors may serve as a relevant reserve for brain cells, promoting neuroplasticity in Parkinson's, at least in the early stage of the disease. In addition, studies in animal models have shown that intensive treadmill exercise plays a neurorestorative action, improving post-lesion dopaminergic transmission. In conclusion, we speculate that the association of exercise with MAOB inhibitor therapy could amplify the beneficial effects of both treatments through different mechanisms, possibly achieving a certain degree of neuroprotection. Beyond the speculation about a possible protective effect of exercise, our results suggest that an exercise intensive in the early stage of the disease can not only slow down disease progression, but it can also lead to better motor performance. This conclusion is in agreement with the current guidelines, which encourage patients with Parkinson's to begin exercise training programs with a high training intensity beyond what they may self-select with a multidisciplinary approach, PT, OT, speech. In fact, with the disease progression, the sedentary lifestyle imposed by the motor symptoms worsens balance and gait disturbances, which do not respond as well to dopaminergic therapy, but they do respond to exercise. In addition, other non-motor symptoms such as depression, fatigue, apathy, and constipation further reduce physical activity in these patients. This is why this vicious cycle should be stopped as soon as possible, as its onset produces early deterioration in physical fitness, which in turn leads to a more rapid disease progression. So bottom line is, if you are not exercising, you want to get started with an exercise program. If you're already exercising, you want to see, is there anything I can do to be exercising a little bit better and get more out of it? If you are early, it is totally normal when you are first diagnosed to be in maybe a state of denial for a while, to experience a period of depression, to not really know, what does this mean for my whole life? But the sooner you can get started with exercise, the better. So please, please, please get started with something on your own, access something in your area, join Rogue's online exercise membership. If you live out of area, if you live close to Rogue, please come in and do a consultation with us so we can help get you started and do exercise that is fun, intensive, and is going to help you now and over the long term. So hopefully that article was very inspiring for you. I recommend downloading it, reading it, highlighting it, bringing it to your doctor, posting it up for motivation. To me, this is it's extremely motivating, both for myself for exercise and to do the work that we do here at Rogue. We're very happy to be here and help support people in their exercise. Email me if you have a question, claire@roguept.com, and I'll see you next month with another research highlight. Have a great day.